Hello and welcome to the Psychology of Us. I'm Professor RJ Starr, and I'm calling this episode The Lie of Finding Yourself, Why Self-Authorship is the Real Work. Today we're going to dismantle one of the most persistent and quietly damaging ideas in modern life, that somewhere out there, if you search long enough, hard enough, or suffer deeply enough, you will eventually find yourself. This idea has been romanticized, commercialized, and repeated until it's practically gospel, printed on coffee mugs, painted on yoga studio walls, and woven into nearly every self-help narrative. Go find yourself, they say, as if the real you is lost in the wilderness, or hiding behind your job, your heartbreak, or a passport stamp you haven't collected yet. But what if it's not true? What if the entire premise is backwards? What if there is no self to find and only a self to build? Today, we're going to look at the psychology behind this idea, not just to challenge it, but to offer something far more honest and far more empowering in its place, something called self-authorship. It's the process by which we stop waiting for permission, stop searching for a hidden identity or a purpose or a passion, and start deliberately creating a life that reflects who we choose to be. That's the real work. More difficult than soul-searching, but infinitely more powerful. Because when you stop living like there's a map you're supposed to follow, you start realizing you're the one holding the pen. This is not just a philosophical concept. It's a psychological shift, one that can change the way you see your past, your choices, and your future. So if you've ever felt lost, stuck, or like you're failing some invisible test by not having it all figured out, this episode is for you. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Let's talk about the myth itself. The idea that there's a true version of you buried somewhere, under trauma, under failure, under distraction, and that your job in life is to uncover it. This myth didn't come from nowhere. It has roots in Western romanticism, in the individualism that prizes personal destiny over collective identity. It got a boost from psychology, but a diluted version of it, not from real existential inquiry, but from the watered-down therapy speak that's been stripped of its rigor and repackaged into hashtags and mantras. And it's everywhere. It shows up in books that tell you to go find your calling, in movies where the protagonist just needed to take a solo trip to Bali to discover who they really are, in conversations where someone says, "I just don't know who I am anymore," and the response is, "You just need to go find yourself." It's become emotional shorthand for, "I'm unhappy and I don't know what to do." But instead of leading us toward reflection and responsibility, it gives us an escape hatch, a seductive idea that maybe there's a version of me out there, whole and untouched by confusion. And if I just look long enough, I'll stumble into it. It feels comforting because it removes the burden of authorship. If your real self is already fully formed and just misplaced, then your job is simply to wait or search. No risk, no construction, no ownership, just eventual arrival. But the truth is, that arrival never comes. Not because you're broken, but because that self never existed. There is no finished sculpture hiding beneath the marble. There is only stone and your hand on the chisel. Psychologically, this myth is damaging because it creates passivity. It tricks people into thinking they're behind in a race they never chose to run. It tells you to wait for clarity before you act. But clarity doesn't precede action. It follows it. When people say, I need to find myself, what they often mean is, I want someone else to confirm who I am. But that's not how identity works. The self is not revealed. It's declared. It's built, revised, sometimes burned down, and built again. And here's where we draw the line between illusion and integrity. You're not lost. You are unwritten. And that is not a flaw. That is potential. So if you're not here to find yourself, what are you here to do? You're here to author yourself. Self-authorship is a psychological process, a cognitive shift in how we understand identity, meaning, and choice. It's where you stop asking the world to reflect you and start asking yourself to define you. It shifts the center of control from external mirrors to internal alignment. It's not about discovering what's already there. It's about creating what wasn't on purpose. In developmental psychology, this shift shows up in what Robert Kegan called the move from the socialized mind to the self-authoring mind. The socialized mind absorbs values, beliefs, and identity from the world around it. It conforms. It adapts. It defines itself by what others expect. But the self-authoring mind steps back. It questions. It edits. It writes. And most importantly, it chooses. Let's ground this in real terms. Self-authorship means you stop asking, who am I? And start asking, who do I want to become? It means you stop waiting for your life to align with some invisible template and start recognizing that the template was yours to create all along. It means you realize that identity isn't something handed to you at birth or something that will fall into place if you just journal enough. It is the sum of your choices, your commitments, your values in action, not your values in theory. And no, this isn't about perfection or constant reinvention. It's about coherence. It's about waking up and realizing that every decision you make is a sentence in the story of who you are. And you cannot outsource the pen. When you step into full self-authorship, several things happen at once. First, you reclaim agency. You no longer see your life as something that's happening to you, but as something you are shaping. Imperfectly, yes, but intentionally. You begin to understand that even your limitations are materials you can work with. They're not your prison. They are your context. Second, you begin to shed false identities, the ones you picked up just to fit in, to get approval, to avoid conflict. You start to recognize them as scripts, borrowed, not chosen. And once you see them clearly, you get to decide whether they stay in the story. Third, you gain psychological flexibility. When you're the author, you don't need the world to confirm your identity. You're not shattered when someone doesn't get you. You're not waiting for validation. You can stand in uncertainty because you know that you are the one giving structure to the chaos, not the other way around. Let's be clear, this is not easy work. Self-authorship is not a one-time decision. It's a lifelong practice of realigning your life with your chosen values. Even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when it's unclear. It's not sexy. It won't trend. But It is the most psychologically sound, emotionally liberating, and spiritually honest way to live. Because when you stop waiting to be found, you realize you were never lost. You were just unwritten. And now the pen is yours. Let's talk about the impact. Why does this shift from trying to find yourself to choosing to author yourself actually matter? Because the consequences are profound, not just existentially, but practically, emotionally, and psychologically. Believing you have to find yourself keeps you in delay, waiting for clarity that never comes, and deferring decisions that build it. You hesitate to commit because you're not sure if it aligns with who you really are. You avoid discomfort, thinking maybe the right version of yourself will feel effortless once you locate it. But self-authorship kills that delay. It forces you to engage, to act, to choose, even in uncertainty. And that does something radical. It builds resilience. Psychologically, agency is one of the most protective forces against anxiety, depression, and despair. Not control, agency. The sense that your actions influence your direction, even when outcomes are uncertain. Self-authorship activates that agency. When you start thinking in terms of who you're becoming rather than who you're supposed to find, you begin to make decisions with power behind them. Not because you know everything, but because you've accepted responsibility for shaping the narrative. You're no longer asking life to give you answers. You're asking yourself better questions and daring to answer them out loud. And the result? Well, you develop psychological coherence. You feel more grounded. You feel less like a fragmented person trying to live multiple incompatible lives. Instead, you're integrating values, actions, boundaries, goals. Even your failures begin to fit within a story that makes sense because they're a part of what you're building, not evidence of what you've failed to find. This shift also reduces existential anxiety, not by pretending that life has some sort of inherent meaning, but by letting you give meaning where you choose. You're not trying to live up to a cosmic blueprint. You're sketching that blueprint yourself. That's not emptiness. That's freedom. Well, yes, it's a heavier kind of freedom, the kind that demands clarity, effort, and daily authorship, but it also brings with it a quiet sense of strength. Because deep down, you stop fearing that you're behind or broken. You begin to understand that the people who seem to have found themselves probably just did the hard work of choosing who to be and stuck with it. That's why this shift matters, because it gives you your life back. Now let's break this down from the abstract to the everyday. What does self-authorship actually look like? Well, it looks like this. You wake up one morning and instead of asking, what should I be doing with my life? You ask, what kind of person do I want to be today? And what action supports that? That single shift in question changes your posture toward the day. Instead of waiting for meaning to present itself, you are generating that meaning. You're making micro decisions that align with a chosen identity, not a discovered one. It looks like choosing values on purpose, not the ones you inherited from your parents or absorbed from your culture or borrowed from your friend group, but the ones you've tested, questioned, and decided to live by. It looks like editing your story, going back and saying, I used to believe I had to always be agreeable or successful or invisible to survive, but I don't believe that anymore. That's not who I'm choosing to be. And then living like you mean it. It looks like reclaiming choice in the places where you used to feel trapped. Maybe your job isn't ideal. Maybe your relationship is struggling. Maybe your health isn't perfect, but instead of saying, this is just who I am, you say, this is where I am, and I'm writing from here. In practice, self-authorship means setting boundaries that reflect your values, not your fears. Speaking in your own voice, even if it's not polished yet. Pursuing goals that matter to you, not the ones that look good on paper. Letting go of identities that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. It means accepting that your story won't ever be finished, only continued. You will never wake up one day and feel like, yes, I finally found the completed version of me. Because there is no final version. You are a dynamic system, evolving, responding, learning, reauthoring. And that's not failure. That's maturity. Tools that support self-authorship: therapy, honest writing, deep conversations with people who don't try to fix you, but invite you to reflect. Taking small risks, saying no when you usually say yes, saying yes when you usually run. And most importantly, understanding that your life is not waiting to be found. It's waiting to be chosen. So here we are. You've spent years, maybe decades, being told to go find yourself. Maybe you tried. Maybe you traveled, read books, changed careers, ended relationships, started new ones, hoping something would finally click, hoping that somewhere along the path, you'd stumble into the version of you that felt complete and finally right. And maybe it never happened, not because you failed, but because the entire premise was flawed. You are not a buried artifact waiting to be unearthed. You are not a hidden gem in someone else's map. You are the one who draws the map. You are the one who builds the road. You are the one who writes the character into existence, choice by choice, value by value, line by line. That's not an easy path, my friends. It doesn't come with signs or approval or applause, but it comes with something better: ownership. You're not lost. You're not broken. You're not behind. You are becoming, intentionally, consciously, courageously. The lie of finding yourself has kept too many people stuck in passive longing. But the truth of self-authorship frees you to act today, not someday. It frees you to speak with a voice that is yours, even if it shakes. To live by values you choose, even if they're hard to uphold. To design a life that reflects your soul, not one that waits for your soul to be revealed. So let this be your permission slip. If you feel like you've been waiting for one, not to find yourself, but to make yourself, and to do it with clarity, integrity, and no apologies.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.